Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the shop. I'm working on my 1974 Bronco tonight. I wish I would have started doing the videos a little bit sooner, because as you can see, we're already a good ways into it. So far we've had the frame sandblasted, and then I painted it. Did a little bit of rust repair around some of the body mounts back there. New leaf spring mounts on the front of the rear springs, new rear shackle mounts, a little more rust repair behind the coil buckets on each side as well. Tonight I'm just out here. I'd like to get the flywheel and the bell housing on so that I can measure for the throw-up bearing. I'm going to try to use throw-up bearing from a Jeep YJ. Switch to a hydraulic clutch. I'm already using the Ax15 5-speed out of the YJ, so I figure if I can use the hydraulic throw bearing, this is the old one, but I'm just going to use it for measurements, make sure that this will work, and then once I know that the height and everything is going to be okay, then I'll go ahead and order a new one and convert this over to a hydraulic clutch, which saves a bunch of issues with trying to set up the linkage and everything like that. And I've had a manual transmission with a manual clutch. They suck, and it takes up a bunch of extra room, causes issues for exhaust routing and headers, and so much easier just to have a single flex sign running down to your throw-up bearing from the master cylinder, and you're done. So I'll throw it on a little bit of a time lapse. So I'm going to put the flywheel on, put the clutch on, put the bell housing, and then I can take some measurements to see if that throw-up bearing will work for us. Alright, so there we go. I got the flywheel, clutch, and the bell housing all installed. I'm sure you guys, when I was doing this, I did not put a pilot bearing in yet. I don't have the right one. The main purpose for this was just so that I could now take a straight edge, take a measurement from this face over to the fingers on the clutch disc, or on the clutch pressure plate, and then take a measurement from the mounting face of the transmission, just right here, over to where that throw-out bearing reaches, and I can figure out if that throw-out bearing is going to work for the Bronco transmission or not. And I mean, I'm just spitballing here, but it looks like it will. If anything, I'm gonna have to rebend these lines, because I don't think they're gonna be bent to come out of the bell housing quite right. But that's pretty easy to do. Not too concerned. But yeah, so this slides onto here. And so now with this collapsed, I can take a measurement from this face to this bearing, and then a measurement on the bell housing from the face of the bell housing to the fingers on the pressure plate. And as long as I have enough clearance for this, it should work perfect. I may actually even have to shim this slightly. You can put shims behind it in order to get your distance set correctly. So I'll get set up, and that'll be the next step, is to take all those measurements, and then if we're good to go, I will order the new throw bearing, and I need a clutch alignment tool and the pilot bearing, and then the transmission and everything can go on. So pretty soon we'll be up to the transmission. And then next will be the transfer case, which is right here. It still needs to be gone through, cleaned up, painted, new seals, make sure it's good to go. I haven't seen too many other, actually I don't think I've ever found anybody. The Ax15 is a super common swap on the Bronco, but I don't see very many people running the Jeep transfer case. So that's an MP231 or 241. I've had lots of Jeeps, and so I'm very familiar with this transfer case. I've never had any failures. Jeeps all the way up to 38-inch tall tires with a V8, and I've never had a failure of the transfer case ever, so I don't see why they wouldn't work well in the Bronco. They're lighter, they're smaller than the one that comes with the Bronco from the factory, and then that one doesn't need any type of adapters or any other modifications to go right on the Ax15 because it was already on there before. So it should be pretty easy to get us to that step, so stick around, we'll do that next. Alright, so what you guys just watched was me machining the adapter to run the Jeep. This would be like an early Jeep YJ, so I believe like up to 93 with the internal slave cylinder. So that's the slave cylinder I want to run on the Bronco. So I had to make a spacer that pushed the slave out 5/8 of an inch to make up for the adapter plate, mounting the Ax15 to the Ford bell housing. So there it is there. So this will locate on the transmission end, and then the pilot bearing, or sorry, the throw bearing will sit on this second shoulder, spacing it out 5/8 of an inch. And then that way there, the clearance to the clutch fingers is correct, and everything should line up. So stick around, we'll get that put on, make sure it all fits good, and then we should be able to install the transmission for the last time. Alright, so I got everything machined, I got everything assembled. I'll bring it over to this side so you guys can see. That's how that's all going to be set up. So there's the spacer we machined, and that gives us the correct spacing. So when this is installed and compressed, we got a small gap against the pressure plate, and then I've got the new lines made up, so these should exit out the factory fork hole on the bell housing, and then from there we can connect the bleeder and connect it up to the master cylinder. So I wanted to get a shot of this before I put it all together, but in a few more minutes transmission should be installed for good. We shouldn't have to take it back off again. that was a bit of a mess around. I'm sure you can notice even in the time lapse, I kind of had to fight with it a little bit. I don't have a clutch alignment tool, so I was using the transmission input shaft as the clutch alignment tool to get the clutch disc aligned, and then slid it back out, put the bell housing on, slid the transmission in afterwards. It worked, it's just a little harder to fight with the entire transmission to get it lined up properly versus just the little plastic clutch alignment tool. But as you can see, everything is installed, everything is lined up, and then if I can get a flashlight in there, you can see there we go. You can see the factory Jeep hydraulic throwout bearing is in there with the two lines. I kind of had a little bit of a lack of foresight, but we were able to manage, so I thought I would be able to leave the lines on when I was putting the transmission in, but the hole in the factory Ford bell housing is not nearly big enough. So luckily, though, I removed the lines, slid it all together, and there's enough room to get the lines in and the clips on, these two lines, through the original clutch fork hole in the bell housing. It's tight, but with a long pair of needle nose pliers, you can slide the little horseshoe clips on, and everything fits in there good. And so you got these two lines coming out now. This is the bleeder line. This flare will get cut off, and there's a basically exact same thing as a brake bleeder gets put on here. And then this line will also get cut and flared, and then there's a rubber hose that goes from here to another hard line on the firewall, and then eventually up to the clutch master cylinder. And then for the fork hole here, I haven't made it yet, but Jeep from the factory has like a little rubber grommet that goes in there, and I have it. Here it is. So this little rubber grommet here. So I tried to get the lines so that they would line up still for this little rubber grommet to go in there. And then I'll make a little cover panel for this fork hole that this rubber grommet fits into. And then this kind of just fits over the lines. Hard to do this one-handed apparently. There. A little rubber grommet will go on there, and I'll make a little cover panel that fills in the rest of this with a hole for that rubber grommet, and then that'll keep all the dust and dirt and debris and everything out of there. And it should look really good. I think it'll look nice in stock. And by eliminating all of that factory linkage, so the pivot point for the factory clutch would have attached here, and then there's the bar that goes across, and then a rod over to the fork that runs through here. All of that kind of makes a bit of a mess for your exhaust, whereas now this whole area is wide open. And they'll have these two lines, which I can even bend these so they're a little tighter to the bell housing. I can kind of bend them on maybe about a 45 along the edge of the bell housing, make them even tighter so that I don't have to worry about header or exhaust clearance after the fact. So I'm going to finish the video off there. The next video probably be next week. We'll be tackling the steering. Right now, it's a piece of unistrut. And so the plan is to do a GM style 1-ton tie rod. And we're going to do a tie rod flip so that they're going to be on top of the knuckles instead of below the knuckles. And so that should help with bump steer and help with the steering geometry. And then the GM style 7/8 tie rod ends, they're way bigger, beefier. Not that this thing's going to get off-roaded a whole lot, or probably not at all, honestly, but it was almost cheaper. Actually, I'm pretty sure it was cheaper to make my own tie rod and drag link using the GM stuff than it was to to replace the Ford tie rod and drag link, because they're an entire like single piece assembly. They're only adjustable on one end, and they're not cheap to replace. I want to say they were about $500 or $600 when I looked them up, and I got like 300 into the tie rod end. So that'll be the next video, so keep an eye out for it. If you guys liked what we were doing here, if you took anything away, if you learned anything, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so that you can see more videos. Thanks, guys.